Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of the Listen Up podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. This episode is brought to you by Arizona Hearing Center. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so that they connect better with their family and friends and remain independent. The reason I'm so passionate about helping patients with hearing loss is because I lost my brother Robbie twice. First to his hearing loss from radiation from his brain tumor, again when he passed away. I only care for ears. I'm the ear of ENT who's performed over 10,000 ear surgeries over the past 20 years. I'm the founder of Arizona Hearing Center, and I'm the author of Listen Up. Go to listenuphearing.com to learn more about the book, and go to azhear.com if you have any questions, or email us if you would like more information. Today, we have a great guest. We have Dr. Terri Edwards. She's the founder of NewSound Solutions. She's treated thousands of patients with hearing loss, dizziness, and tinnitus during her career. She holds a doctorate degree in audiology from the Arizona School of Health and Sciences at A.T. Still University. She earned her master's and bachelor degrees from California State, Los Angeles, and Long Beach, respectively. She's licensed in the big state of Texas. She's a master of her craft. She's an awesome audiologist. Dr. Edwards has been married for over 30 years and has 2 grown children. Her most favorite things is being a mom and traveling with her family. Welcome. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you being a guest. It's great to see you. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Dr. Sims. It's an honor to be here. I'm doing great. I've had a great day seeing patients and treating hearing loss, and here we are.
Yeah, that's what makes it all great. Well,
Absolutely.
One of the things I love to hear is people's journey. Like, so how, one day you were a student of something and you ended up being this master audiologist, doctorate of audiologist who's a master at her craft. So tell me how you ended up going into audiology. I love hearing these stories.
So when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my parents had some friends we lived in Colorado, and he was stationed. He was captain or something in the military, in the Army, at Fort Carson. Mm-hmm. And our parents were friends. They had a deaf daughter, and we were the same age. She had no speech, could not communicate other than through sign. And we were good friends for, maybe about a year, but we would play all day, run around. The only way we could communicate was to giggle and chase each other. And we would go to bed at night with flashlights in our sleeping bags, and she would teach me sign language. So the next day we could communicate a little bit better. Well, they went off, and I remember we weren't friends very long. They moved to Washington, D.C., and from that time on, I knew that I wanted to work with the hearing impaired population.
That's great.
So I cannot, the craziest thing about this story is I cannot remember that little girl's name.
No, maybe somebody will see this podcast.
Yes, I would love to talk to her and just see where she's at and, be able to communicate with her. And I literally have no idea what her name was. But she impacted my life so much.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. That's a great story. So tell me your best patient story from the recent past. We all have these great times where, somebody has a moment or reminds us why we do all this. Tell me yours.
So not too long ago, I have a husband and wife that are patients, and I've been seeing him for about 4 or 5 years. So he brought his wife in, and she had declined cognitively so much. Like everything he did, everything I asked, he had to answer for her. She was a little bit more feeble, constantly looking at him to try to get confirmation on what should be said. And she had hearing loss. I fit her with, I treated her and fit her with some really neat hearing instruments. And she came back about 2.5 weeks later. It's usually 10 days, but she came back about 2.5 days later, and I literally did not recognize her. I couldn't believe it cognitively. Her husband was not with her. She had been out shopping. She was gone. The difference in needing help from somebody and that decline cognitively to now the independence of being able to completely do everything on her own. It was crazy. I literally thought she was mild to moderate dementia. And we treated her and she came back and absolutely independent. And that was a really, really fun treatment because she noticed it. He noticed it. It was life-changing for them. It was amazing. Yeah. I had one recently that I've been seeing for about 13 years probably, and she had lost hearing in her left ear about 13 years ago. And about January, she woke up one day and had lost hearing on her right side as well, completely gone. But she's going in for a cochlear implant this coming week. So we're very excited about that and excited to get her some help. That one's been quite a journey as well.
Get her access to sound.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes. So excited to get her some help.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So, what is your typical treatment course? So when somebody comes in, you do your initial consultation and treatment. So what type of follow-up? I'm sure it's very hands-on. So if I were coming to you, what would be the typical follow-up you would do? I mean, you mentioned it happened a little off schedule, but I'm just curious in terms of how much. I'm sure you touch your patients a lot. So what is that?
Yes, we do. So we're about 85% physician referral. And then I work with a colleague that's an ear, nose, and throat doctor in his office that I just lease space in his office and we work together. So most of everybody we get, it's a physician relationship that come to my office. But once we treat them, we'll treat them for hearing loss. They come back in 10 days. We'll call them in 3 days, make sure they're doing well. Any questions, any problems. We also have a texting number that they can text us at any point if they're having any problems or questions. Because I have found that the more we work together, the more successful the patient is with the treatment.
And that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm. We always do REM a couple times within the first 3 weeks to make sure we're fitting correctly. We'll do functional testing to make sure, and then we'll see them at 10 days. Usually, if they're having any issues putting them in or anything, we'll see them in 10 days. Otherwise, we'll see them in 3 weeks, and let that brain adapt to all the sound while we're doing the testing to make sure that we're on target as we're fitting them. And I'm a really slow fitter. So, and the way we treat, I may start very softly where they're getting some help, and then we'll adapt that up as the brain can take more. Like there's no reason just to slam them with sound.
Right.
Let the brain have time to adapt.
So you're talking about a phenomenon where people have to get used to the introduction of new sound.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yes. There's always funny stories from that. But I think it's so much stimulation to the brain, especially with the new technology that really can give so much clarity through the neural pathways that their brain gets kind of tired. It's kind of overwhelming.
Well, especially if they don't have a good filtering capacity, right? So everything, they can't pull out what they want to hear, right? So oftentimes they'll say, the problem is I hear everything. I don't hear what I want to hear. And what do you tell patients when they say that? Or you may not see that because you don't turn it up so quickly.
Yeah, I don't see that very often, actually. So what I do find is they'll say there's so many new sounds. I hear the refrigerator running. I hear in the beginning, like the first 3 days, there's a lot of new stimulation. And they don't really complain about it because I don't turn it up, all the way. And by the time I see them in 10 days, you get a lot more acclimation, I think. And they'll always say the first 3 days, I was kind of tired. I was a little overwhelmed by the sound. And I think if you set the expectations and you educate the patient, they're ready for all of that. But when you don't, and you just put sound in, it's hard. It's stressful for them and their system.
Yeah, well, that's what people who are excellent at this understand, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
And,
so.
and so what are some of the funny sounds that people have told you? I love these stories, people.
Oh my goodness. I think my funniest one was I had a lady come in. She was early 50s, and church lady, think church lady, like choir lady, church lady. And she came in and said, she'd worn about 3 weeks. And she said, Dr. Edwards, can I ask you something? I said, sure. And she said, when you're in a bathroom, do you hear everybody pee?
It's funny, that's what I was going to say. I had a patient say, I forgot that it made noise when you're, when I pee and it goes into the toilet. That's a common word.
That was the fun. And then as soon as I started laughing, I didn't handle it probably very professionally. I cracked up, and she got it. She's like, oh, they hear me. Like, she didn't realize anybody could hear her, So that was one of them that was really funny.
That's a great story. And so, some of the patients, as you know, are resistant to getting their hearing treated. So, like, what are some of the common things you hear from patients in terms of their resistance?
I think some of the resistance is, I hear fine. I hear good enough. It's up to them to talk a little bit louder. They don't have to be mumbling.
And so what do you tell patients? How do you counsel that? That's a great thing to, What do you tell them?
So I tell them hearing loss is very similar to vision impairment. And it's not that you're blind. It's not like you don't hear anything. It's that you hear blurry, just like your vision. You don't hear everything. And then we'll talk about, and the reason you may not hear that as well is I go directly into the cochlea can be damaged. And I believe that when you go to the doctor, I really believe this, you want to know what's physiologically happening in your body. So I really take the time to explain this could be happening in your cochlea. This could be happening in your neural pathway, or it could be happening in the left temporal lobe, right here in the brain. Like, that whole system could be compromised due to the hearing loss. What can we do to help you with that? And when you educate the patient, then you have a patient that is very willing to work with you because you've created a trust situation. And
so, there are some that are even resistant at that. What you push a little harder, they push back at you. What's your second level? Because we all hit this, most.
Yeah, absolutely. Like our objections, like our three major objections are no money, no value, no problem. Right. So as you hit all of those, and for us in our office, we believe if you can hit all of those or any of their objections in the very first phone call when they call in, if you can begin the education process then and try to solve their problems and solve their objections in the very first phone call, then when the patient does come in, you're past all the objections because they've gotten good education. Or you've been able to say, look, money isn't a problem because we can effectively treat your hearing on a monthly payment. You don't have to pay thousands at one time. So all of a sudden now we've solved that money problem right off the bat. And then you can really treat the patient and be the doctor and not have to hit all the objections once you're done with the hearing test. And now it's a surprise that they cost this much. Like, it's all educated up front.
Sure.
And that's been really, really effective in our clinic.
So I think that's great. I really thought about doing it on the phone. Like, so what does that look like? I mean, we all know there's resistance and some of them won't even come in. So when you try to hit those three objections on the phone, what does that look like?
Yeah. So what happens is, let's say somebody will go on my website and they'll click on the offer for the book that I've co-authored, right? And then that will send us an email that says, Mr. Smith at this email address wants your book. Right. So then we'll contact them immediately and say, hey, can we answer any other questions? And I've got a really good treatment care coordinator. So she'll call them and she'll go through a whole process of asking questions and educating about hearing loss. We do a process called FORM, and it talks about what's your situation. You know, F is for family, O is for occupation, R is for recreation, M is for motivation. Like, what's your motivation for even contacting us in the first place? Once you can get past all of those things and understand what their symptoms and their problems are, and what they contacted you for a reason.
Right. They know something's wrong.
Right. So as you do that, then you can really get to their objection, whatever that one objection is. Let's say I don't think I have a problem. My wife thinks I have a problem. Well, what is the problem that your wife thinks? Well, I turn the TV up too loud. And then your next question you can ask is, well, is it because you don't hear it or because you don't understand it? Well, understanding could be part of the auditory cortex. That could be past hearing. That could be atrophy because you've had hearing loss a long time. That's something you need to help. That's something we need to immediately address, because that's brain atrophy. That could be brain atrophy, right? That's something we need to talk about. And when do you want the appointment?
Sure.
And they're likely to do it when you can bring in physiologically what could possibly be wrong. And all that needs to be educated in your staff. So everything you say from that first phone call through the entire process, the whole staff is on board with the same thing. You know, like we always tell our patient, hearing loss is a progressive degenerative disease. It's serious. It's a serious medical problem. It's not just I don't hear well. You know, I don't hear. It is a progressive degenerative disease that can cause greater risk and other health risks.
Yeah, I mean, diabetes is obviously elevated sugar in your blood, but there's a medical implications of having that, right? And
Yes.
so it's the downstream implications of that. And you and I both know that, hearing loss, untreated hearing loss is associated with a higher incidence of memory problems and dementia. We know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that's a really important thing to get across to people. It'll be interesting to see where it all goes. One of the things is there's been, maybe a little bit of hesitancy in the medical for us to say, treating it will make it better. But it does, right? Because that first patient you talked about clearly.
Absolutely.
About 90 days, right? I mean, have you seen her husband back? Because I'd love to hear what his feedback is.
Yes, I have actually. And I actually called him after. And
is this a new wife you sent over?
Exactly. I'm like, what happened? And he's like, oh my goodness. He said, I can't believe how different she is. I'm sorry, my cat just jumped up.
That's okay. They want to be famous too.
So anyway, yeah, she was just like, he was like, I just can't believe it. We're so much better at home. We can communicate better. We're watching TV in the same room. It was just fun because treating hearing loss is about connection. Not only is it about physiologically giving better brain health, which I believe is the foundation of what we do.
Right.
I believe hearing is, if you treat the brain and you give it the right information, you hear better, right? You don't hear better when you're giving the wrong information to the brain and you increase cognitive load. You don't hear better. Those hearing instruments go in the drawer.
Right.
But when you really help someone, then you get to give connection to those around them and their loved ones and their friends, and they're confident and they speak better and they talk better. And it's super cool when you really are treating somebody. It's so fun. It's like the best thing ever.
No, it's amazing. And when you look at these, oftentimes I'll say to patients, especially ones who are somewhat resistant, well, one difference between vision and hearing is the reason people get reading glasses is because they can't see the words. But the reason you treat your hearing loss is because others can't communicate with you. So even if you don't want to get them, you get them for everybody else because they're better. Mm-hmm. Right?
I heard you say that on a podcast. I've listened to your podcast and your book. And the other thing I loved that you said was and I've actually started using that, is hearing loss is a negative symptom.
Right.
Like, I never thought about that until you said that. And I was like, wow, like that's one of the pieces that I've been missing.
Well, that's why tinnitus is the driver, right? Because people come in with tinnitus because it's a positive new symptom. They say, well, I've got this noise in my ear. Hearing loss is so insidious because you don't know what you don't hear.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So it's pretty amazing. I think, when you look at other historical things, so, in medicine, we treat high blood pressure, right? And so the reason we treat high blood pressure is over the long run, the heart beating on resistance has a higher incidence of heart attack. Okay.
Right.
And so some very wise people, my predecessors in the medical community, they kind of figured this out in the 40s and the 50s. And so we started treating people's high blood pressure. The definitive study showing that worked came out in 1974. And so I think we will get to that conclusion much faster. But the reality is there's many things in medicine that we treat based on our experience that shows that it's the case. So the answer is when that study comes out, you're going to be like, well, of course it's true. That's just the data validating what my artful practice has been telling me for the past 30 years, that I know that this makes a difference. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I feel very comfortable telling people, it makes sense, right? If you're disconnected, if your brain's working harder, you're not thinking as much, you're not hearing stuff to be able to remember it correctly. I mean, there's so many reasons why hearing loss impacts you, right? You're not as connected, you don't remember it, and you have to work harder. And how are you going to remember what you don't hear right? Right? I mean, everybody has that story, right? I'm going to go to the bank. Why are you going to the bank? Well, they actually said, I'm going to go fill the tank, right, at the car, right? Those types of things.
Oh gosh, and you hear all kinds of those.
So, well, that's great that the husband gave you such great feedback. But
it was really neat. It was amazing.
So and I agree, and and especially if you bring those people for such a change. Now, that being said, I think the hard part is with that patient. Unfortunately, it's impressionable because it was so bad, right? So, it's kind of this thing where you get too far down, you don't really want to get there. Like, we're not saying to people like, well, make sure you're to the point where you're in mild dementia and you're socially withdrawn, then come in. I mean, this is a proverbial ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we don't want our listeners to think like, well, he's just saying like, I can wait, right? Because that was the other one you said was no hurry. And so what do you tell the people when they say no hurry?
Well, then I think sometimes you have to really tell the truth. You have to really tell your patient. I think they say there's no hurry because they don't understand. There's no education on hearing loss out there. So they're like, oh, what? I don't hear. Oh, well, talk louder. That's your responsibility to talk louder. And I believe that that's a point that I'll sit down with my patient and say, look, you have absolute authority of taking care of every single part of your body. It's your responsibility. But my responsibility is to tell you these 4 things, is to tell you that untreated hearing loss causes a risk of dementia. Untreated hearing loss causes cognitive impairment. Untreated hearing loss causes cognitive load. Untreated hearing loss causes ringing in the ears, and it also causes a greater risk of falls. It is my responsibility to tell you that hearing loss isn't about someone talking louder. It's about you taking care of your own health. Is that something you're willing to do? Do you want to take care of your health? Do you take care of your heart? Do you take care of your diabetes? Why wouldn't you take care of your hearing?
Right. 100%. That's great. Yeah, no, it is interesting that, there are certain things and I can remember early in my career where guys just looked at me like, well, patients say, I don't care. They'll have to talk louder. It's
absolutely.
Yeah. And that's a harder one to come back to as compared to, well, there's medical reasons that you need to do this. And I think it's pretty compelling. The evidence is already very compelling in the literature from my purview of it. I think it's really important.
Well, and what's so exciting is, looking back in my career 30 years ago, we didn't have any of that. We didn't hear really about the brain hearing connection till maybe 8 or 10 years ago, where it was really becoming evident that there's a big connection there. And it has changed the way that I treat patients. It's changed the way all that new research has really changed the way I talk to my patients and I educate my patients. And as we've come up with this, the treatment of the technology is phenomenal now, where I remember there was a time in my career where I'm like, I am not putting these terrible hearing instruments on my patients. And I went medical and I only worked in ENT offices, and we'd send it out. So I did that for several years because it wasn't worth it.
There weren't digital.
What was that?
There weren't digital hearing aids at the beginning of your career, right? We had, you just had pull-up plots of the little dials.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
A screwdriver and a high-low is all I had.
Right. So, yeah, it's amazing. The
digital is amazing, but the attenuation of the background, where you can just attenuate it, it's only 8, 10 dB, but you can still attenuate it. And then the new hearing instruments that actually can recall the sounds, and they have the ability to know that sound is not speech. So I'm going to attenuate that automatically, to listen to the speech in front of me. My husband wears hearing instruments. And
well, I hope he got a good deal.
Yes, got a really good deal. So we went to a really noisy, he got them during COVID, like last March, right? So I kept saying to him, are they helping you? Do what's happening with them? And he's like, my favorite thing is that I can hear podcasts through them. I'm like, well, maybe that's not what they're really for. Anyway, we went finally after COVID or in the middle of COVID. Texas kind of opened up maybe last July or August. And we went to a noisy restaurant with friends. And every time we'd gone to this restaurant, he played on his phone the whole time.
Because he couldn't hear.
And I'd be like, you're so rude. Like, what are you doing? I should have known. But he said, you know what? I can't hear it. I just can't hear it. I'm like, all right, you need to come in. So this night we went to the same restaurant, and I kind of watched him the whole time, but I didn't say anything. And on the way home, he said to me, that's the first time I've heard everybody at the table, and I heard the waiter. And that was super, super cool. Like, that was so neat. It was just the neatest thing for me.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you talk to patients about background noise, what do you say to them? Because that's another whole challenge, right? They'll say, oh, I go to these loud restaurants, and, they'll say what you're saying. So
yeah,
how do you talk to them about that?
So I try to coach them on where to sit. I mean, I think that's a big part of it, right? And the technology that they purchase is key for that. If you purchase really good high technology hearing instruments, you are going to be more successful in a noisy environment than you are entry level hearing instruments. They just don't have as much in them. So we talk about that. We also talk about, look, they always want to say, can't you just get rid of the background noise?
Yes, go to a quiet restaurant.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, the problem is with that, if the baby's crying in the table next to you, the baby's screaming, and you look over and there's no noise there, how does your brain adjust to that? Like, that's weird, right? So even though you think you don't want background noise, what you really want is to be able to hear your wife across the table from you.
Right.
It's not that you don't want to hear all of that. You do want to hear the band. You just don't want to, you still want to be able to hear your wife. So I can help you hear your wife and turn the background down a little bit. But the key is the communication at the table. That's what I want to practice with. That's what I want to work with. That's what I want to help you with. And as you educate on that, you can help them, and the expectation. Are you trying to sell a widget and promise them a bunch of stuff, or are you trying to treat hearing loss?
100%.
And that's the difference. Yeah.
Well, this is great. I always love to ask this question. So, if you were getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, who would you thank? So who are those people who helped you get to where you are today? I mean, I think that's important. Who would you thank?
Oh my goodness. So obviously the first person I would think would be my mom. My mom's passed away. She passed away in a car wreck about 10 years ago. Right. But she was a bartender. I mean, she had no real formal education, but I'll tell you what, I was going to college. Whatever she had to do to help me go to college, she was gonna. So she never helped me get in or do any of that. She had no idea how to do that, but I was bound to go. So I really, really appreciate that. My husband, amazing through my doctorate. I did my doctorate. My kids were in 6th and 7th grade, and huge help in all of that, paying for all of that. The other people I want to thank is my kids. My kids are super academic, and they challenge me every single day to keep learning, keep reading, keep growing. Don't stop. You've been in the practice 30 years. That certainly doesn't mean anything. Change it up, learn something new. I mean, every week they call me. Are you reading a new book? What are you reading? What are you learning? What podcast have you listened to? And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful to stay a student, and it's to keep up with them.
Well, it's
yeah.
And so that's wonderful. That's really great. Well, today we've had Dr. Terri Edwards from NewSound Solutions. I really appreciate you being here. Dr. Edwards, how can people get a hold of you?
So our website is newsoundsolutions.com. Go on there. I have co-authored a book called Choose Active Aging, and it talks about brain-hearing connection. It talks about what to do and how to purchase treatment and anything that we can do to help you. My passion is to teach about hearing loss. That is my life's honor to do that. So I would get our book, and it's immediately just mailed to you if you'll go on that form on our website. It's written with Dr. Keith Darrow, who is the only neuroscientist and audiologist in the nation. He is awesome, amazing guy.
That's great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing the podcast today.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.